Welcome back to the Ben Mulroney Show. And look, politics operates at a breakneck speed. And so we got to check in with some very smart people quite often. And today is time for This Week in Politics with our panel. We got Tom Parkin, good friend of the show, principal at Impact Strategies. Tom, you're living a life of Riley there by a lake somewhere. It looks like paradise.
Yeah, it's great.
Regan Watts, founder
this week,
of Fratton.
anyway.
Yeah, we got Regan Watts joining us. He's the founder of Fratton Park, as well as a former senior aide to Jim Flaherty. Nice to see you, my friend.
Morning, Ben.
And for the first time, I've spoken to him many times before, but never on this panel, Yonah Budd, the co-founder and clinical director of the farm Rehab. Welcome to the show, Yonah.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so Yonah, we're going to start with you. You're the new guy on the panel, and I want to talk about Mark Carney. It's still early days, but we're beginning to get a sense of who he is and the kind of prime minister he wants to be. And there are a couple of stories that came out that I think offer some insight into who he is and how he wants to be different from his predecessor. He promised he would be, and these articles suggest that he is. On one hand, he is he's letting people know that bureaucrats better get on board with his breakneck speed of doing things, or they will be replaced. And an insider said something I thought was quite salient because I can appreciate it. He said that there's some bureaucrats who've been in power for so long that they have muscle memory and they rely on process rather than outcomes. And if that's what their priority is, he wants them out. And on the other side, there's talk that he's really trying to govern in a way that attracts, the red Tories, the centrists from all parties to his vision of the country he wants to build. And I guess the question I have for you is, do you think he's genuinely purging all of those aspects of the Trudeau Liberals from his version of the party that was so that there was so much violent opposition to?
Great question. Thanks for having me. I'm not quite sure I'm here because you said it's full of, smart people. But anyway, I'll do the best I can. I think he's done a really good job to taking advantage of the new noise that came into play once he came into office, with what's going on with Trump, with what's going on in the Middle East. And I think he's managed to leverage those distractions, if you will, to help people move off of the old kind of Trudeau mindset and into, his vision of moving forward with a lot of, he seems to be picking up momentum and confidence and support along the way. Because frankly, I think he's doing a hell of a job in terms of his relationship with the U.S. And I think people see him versus Trudeau, physically see him as a much stronger, more dominant, more together guy. And I believe that, the noise and the confusion that we were getting from Trudeau towards the end of all of it, people aren't talking about it so much anymore. They're all talking about this new version of the Liberals who kind of sort of feel like conservatives as well. So I would say he's done a pretty decent job from the outside, but, politics, that's the way it works, right? You got to capture the moment.
Regan Watts, you've gone on record saying that Mark Carney has you purring like a kitten. And I got to say, look, if a Liberal is going to inject $150 billion into military spending, that's kind of my kind of Liberal. However, he does have a caucus that is made up in large part of people who got us into the mess we were in for 10 years. So where do we stand in the sort of on the timeline of, as we said, purging his party of the people that got us into the mess in the first place?
So I can confirm, Ben, that Mr. Carney continues to have me purring because I think as a prime minister, his performance has been exceptional. The country was yearning for change. And you've heard me say this many times, and the line never gets old. The long national nightmare known as Justin Trudeau is well and truly over, and the country is happy about that. Mr. Carney understands, I believe, the time is the moment is here to change the type of governance and government that this country has had. And I would say he is governing far more like a progressive conservative in the Brian Mulroney mold than any of us who watch politics thought. I think there was some legitimate concerns. Concerns is maybe a strong word. So there was a legitimate point to be made about his views on environmental policy, for example. He is a believer in carbon pricing and has written extensively about that kind of topic. And that was a vulnerability for him. But he, appears in his early days and you referenced the defense spending, to not going to his pet files or his pet interests.
Yeah.
He views the country as in needing of reform, and he said this during the campaign: "No crisis, no Carney." And so, I think the story that you referenced at the top about deputy ministers and the performance management of the senior ranks of the civil service is something that's badly needed. One of the unwritten stories of the Trudeau era, the Trudeau Telford era, really, and I reference Katie Telford when I say this, is the absolute decimation of the senior ranks of the public service in the government of Canada. The public service of the government of Canada used to be the gold standard around the world. It is no longer that. And so I think Mr. Carney and Mr. Blanchard as chief of staff and Mr. Sabia, who's coming in as clerk, are going to be bringing a lens and a focus to the senior ranks of the public service, because they know they can't enact their change agenda without having senior officials and the rest of the system not just falling in line, but delivering.
Yeah.
And I think for too long, mediocrity has been rewarded in Ottawa. I mean, it used to be, there's a saying, I used to work in the...
Let me put a pin in that, because I want to bring in Tom Parkin. There were many days, Tom, where the Trudeau Liberals were governing to the left of you. I don't think you could say that about these early days of the Carney government. So give us a perspective from your vantage point.
Yeah, to me, this is a really well. It seems to me that Mark Carney was somebody who people had hopes in more than they had either expectations or knowledge of.
Yeah,
and
that's fair. I think that's fair.
It was this idea that he wasn't Pierre Poilievre, and that was key, and that was easy. He just didn't have to, munch apples and be obnoxious. So the standard was low, and he had to look serious, and he had to talk about Canada, and he had to position against Trump. And people filled in the blanks. A lot of left of center voters filled in the blanks wrongly, and I think
what did the people on the left assume was going to happen when they filled in the blanks?
I think that people thought the top thing was they were going to stop Pierre Poilievre. That was, I think, key for most progressive voters, and the rest was kind of well down the list. As for what Mr. Carney believed or what they thought they were voting for, it's funny, because in a way the conservatives sold him. He was an environmentalist, apparently. He was a liberal. He was a continuation of Justin Trudeau, and so he was comfortable for voters on the left. But that's not the way it's turned out. He's obviously he's killed the carbon tax, making some people purr, and he's had an income tax cut for that's benefited the wealthiest people. He's passed Bill C-5, which is I think unprecedented. The idea that you could have a government that passes regulation that voids bills, that voids regulation, that voids legislation. I don't even know how that can be. How that can happen for any project that he chooses, that he wishes. I mean, that is like king stuff.
Regan, you want to jump in there? You got about 40 seconds.
Hell hath no fury like Tom Parkin and progressive voters skirned, because I wish I could have some sympathy for Tom and his party members. The fact is, the country needs to get moving. Bill C-5 does that. There's lots of things you could quibble about it, but what you cannot doubt and question is the intent, which is to get projects built. And for too long, we have been too deferential in government and policymakers towards third-party interest groups who are funded from various different ways, but with the sole objective of stopping things from happening. I acknowledge fully that there's some First Nations issues that need to be addressed, and I expect Mr. Carney and his government to deal with those. But heaven forbid tax cuts are provided to Canadians who are overtaxed.
Regan, we're going to leave it there. When we come back from the break, I want Yonah's first take on how younger Canadians are more likely to trust the Ayatollah. Good God, don't go anywhere. This is the Ben Mulroney Show, and this is This Week in Politics with Yonah Budd, Tom Parkin, and Regan Watts. Yonah, I want to jump right back in with you. There was a study that came out that said 12% of all respondents in Canada see Iran as, quote, trustworthy. All right. And so that's the number's low, and I like it low. I'd like it lower. However, trust was highest among 18 to 24-year-olds at 34% and lowest with those over 65 at 4%. Now, I guess the definition of you got to ask yourself, what does trustworthy mean? I trust the Iranian regime to use fear and murder and intimidation as tools to stay in power, but I don't trust them for much other than that. Why do you think young people are more open to trusting a repressive regime, and when those are the guys who are typically the tip of the sword for social justice here in Canada?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, first of all, these people have never been to Iran. I think if they'd actually been there or talked to people who have just come from there that live there, they'd realize that it's not a place you'd ever want to be as a young person, because you can't exercise any rights, so to speak, under the current regime. So I'm not a big believer in polls to begin with. I think they're all a bunch of garbage for the most part. But I think what we're dealing with here is, young people like to be on the other side of the conversation. They always like to be on the adverse side of the conversation, to just sort of talk about trusting the Ayatollah and trusting Iran. Either they're high or drunk or just not paying attention, or just being on the opposite side of it. Because anyone with a clear mind, from any religious background, any political belief, looking at what goes on in that country, if after talking to Iranian folks that live there, have come from there, want to go back there, he's an oppressive guy. It's an oppressive regime, and I can't believe that young people can buy into that kind of dictatorship or that kind of control and feel that that's a comfortable place where you can rely on their voice or vote. Surprising.
Tom, this to me is another chapter in the book that started when we uncovered that there were a vast number of young people in North America that thought that Osama bin Laden had some pretty good ideas, and so I'm trying to make this make sense to me.
I think it's really just lack of knowledge. Honestly, if you're a little bit older, you've been through some world experience and world wars. If you are and have some recollection of the Iranian 79, how significant was the Ronald Reagan hostages, you have a very strong view of what this in its present political form is about.
And I'm going to throw it over. While he looks baby-faced, he's an old guy just like me. Regan, this is, I get it, and kids get their information from TikTok and all of that stuff. However, it's those young people who are mobilized in a place like New York City that allowed for somebody who I think is the wrong guy for the job to become mayor of New York, Zoran Madmani, who espouses a lot of these beliefs. He's 33 years old. He espouses a lot of these beliefs, and he just won the Democratic primary to be on the ballot to become the mayor of the biggest and most important city in North America.
So, Ben, there's a couple things that I think are worth unpacking here. I should be clear, and for those who are listening but can't see, we'll see the video. I am wearing an Israeli Defense Forces T-shirt right now. My views on this particular issue have been clear for some time, and I also want to remind your listeners that it's been 1 year, 8 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days since hostages were taken in Israel by Hamas, and there are still people who have not come home, and that is unacceptable. With respect to the views of young people in this country, even 12% of them who view the Iranian regime favorably, well, I think it goes back to, there's a couple of points. One, and it's the old saying, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you don't have a heart, and if you're not a conservative in your 30s, you don't have a brain. I think this is reflective of some of that. You've got young people who really are naive to the world. And I put that down to two things. One, our education system. History is not taught in a way that I believe it used to be taught. I see that in my own kids and what they learn at school. They both go to great schools, mind you, but the history that I learned, and you would have learned, Ben, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, is not the same type of history that's taught today. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I do think it's down to parents. And as parents, we have one job, which is to get our kids ready so that when they leave the house at age 18, 19, 20, they're ready for the world. Part of that responsibility, we teach kids lessons and things they need to do to be productive adults. But part of that that journey as parents is to teach them history and to talk about the good versus evil, because this is a big world. It's sometimes a bad world. It doesn't surprise me that 12% of young people between 18 and 24 support the Iranian regime. I mean, like, there's always a handful of idiots, but
no, it's 34%.
But I also put that down to parents.
34%. They think it's trustworthy.
Well, the number that I read in particular, though, was that there was 12% of people in that group who were surveyed who support that. The other thing, though, I think to be clear, is in the poll, in deference to the poll, is that the majority of people think regime change in Iran would be a good thing. And I think that that there is a silver lining there, because regime change in Iran would be, I think, a net positive. It has to be carefully managed. The last time a regime change in the world actually took place and was successfully managed with a large bloc of countries is when your father was prime minister, and President George Herbert Walker Bush, along with President Reagan before him, helped lead to the downfall of the Eastern Bloc and the Soviet Union.
All right,
and that was a time.
Listen, thank you for that. I do want to shift gears for the few remaining minutes we have, and this is less of a political thing, and this is more. I want your take as Canadians, because there was a story recently of sort of Canadian provincial leaders who met with their contiguous American partners. So representatives from Maine, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, Connecticut, New Hampshire, who attended. And it was really about trying to address the economic downturn that a lot of those American states were feeling because Canadians were staying home with their dollars, specifically their tourist dollars. I'm just going to tell you from my perspective, given the fact that this was a fight with the America that we didn't ask for, that we fought tooth and nail to avoid, I'm kind of feeling, as much as I love my friends in the United States, as much as I respect and admire and love America, I'm kind of saying, you know what? Like, I'm focused on fixing what's wrong here. You guys figure out your issues down there, but I don't have a lot of time to worry about the American local economies when we have our own issues up here, a lot of which was created by a particular person in the White House. And I want to know, Yonah, do you think I'm being petty here?
No, I don't. I think that you're acknowledging real feelings about real things, and we seem to have lost. People I talk to seem to have lost a focus on what's happening in our backyard, because there's a lot of noise. I started saying this in the beginning of the show. There's a lot of noise going on that distracts people from thinking about the stuff that really affects them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you're kind of.
Yeah.
I think you're on the money.
Yeah.
I think we have to tune down the noise.
Yeah.
And look in our backyards and get our heads together.
Tom, about 25 seconds to you.
Well, I think I feel, and I think most Canadians feel, that Americans are people just like them, and they're trying to make their way in the world. And so, of course, it's not nice. It's negative if somebody's life is badly affected by President Trump.
Yeah.
It's really unfortunate. But, this is, we were just talking about Iran. People living in Iran, just regular people trying to get along in life. Terrible regime. What are you going to do about it? Not much. You can say you're sorry, but there's not much you can do about it. It's up to that government to try and fix that problem.
And Regan, I wish I could come to you. I saw you nodding that I was being petty. We will dispute that offline, my friend. But I want to thank all three of you for joining us. I hope you come back real soon. All the best. And Yonah, thank you for joining us for the very first time. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of The Ben Mulroney Show.